What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. Today we have Heather Kelly on the podcast. She is the founder of Heather's Choice, which, if you're a backpack hunter, you've heard of. Amazing food company. She's an accomplished athlete. She's a health expert. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's an Alaska native. They are based in Anchorage, Alaska. I actually just visited them this summer. We talk about treating starting a business as an adventure, her past success in athletics, health in the backcountry, coping with fear, and much, much, much more. Awesome conversation. Before you check out the podcast, make sure you support our sponsors, GoHunt.com, amazing resource for hunters, OutdoorClass.com, Remy Warren, Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, John Barklow, etc. You can learn from them. Also, PeaksEquipment.com. Your equipment needs in the backcountry, you can find them there. All right. Enjoy my conversation with Heather. Cheers. The Altitude Show is brought to you by Peaks Equipment, the world's leading technical, hard goods, and accessories brand for backcountry enthusiasts. From trekking poles to headlamps to best-in-class gaiters, Peaks delivers a system of products that work to achieve optimal performance in the harshest conditions. Don't suffer on your hunting adventures. Peaks enables you to thrive on the mountain when everyone else is going home. Visit peaksequipment.com and use code ALTITUDE for 10% off today. That's ALTITUDE for 10% off on peaksequipment.com. Outdoor Class is the new source of premium outdoor education from trusted and knowledgeable experts. For hunters committed to improving their skills, Outdoor Class is the only subscription-based e-learning platform that provides unlimited access to video lessons from the world's most respected experts. Learn from industry leaders like Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and other experts across all the topics that affect you as a hunter. Make sure to follow Outdoor Class Official on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and take your game to the next level by going to outdoorclass.com. You can use code ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off. That is Altitude at checkout for 20% off at outdoorclass.com. Heather, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for making the time.
And you also look very comfortable. And I feel like I'm not very comfortable. So I feel like I should pull up a couch or something here.
Yeah, I was thinking about that before you hit record of what my vibe is. And I'm sitting on the floor with a blanket. I've got tea. I've got a space heater. It's there's a candle burning. I'm super zenned out right now. And it's a lovely way to spend a Friday.
Well, the rest of the week is hard enough. Sometimes Fridays, you got to kind of let go.
Yeah, I think too, just jumping right in, that whole perception of entrepreneurship is that you just grind and grind and grind and go, 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 go. And you're always at your desk hammering on your keyboard. And I am not here for that.
No, who would want?
It's not my MO.
Right. If that's your whole goal, then it's a tough road ahead, right?
Yeah.
I think at least the reason why I think most people get into entrepreneurship is to create some level of freedom, but freedom's no good unless you actually utilize it. And I catch myself doing this all the time. I create my own schedule because I own my own companies, but I'll find weeks where it's I literally didn't do anything outside. For example, a couple weeks ago, I went for a hike and I'm wow, nature is neat. I've been in my office for months of the winter and I forgot how neat nature is. And I'm wait a minute. One of the reasons I did this is for freedom. Why the hell am I not using it?
Yep. Yeah. I feel for me, it's helpful to imagine that there's seasons where maybe I don't feel like I have a life and I'm just in work mode. But then there also get to be seasons where I can really kind of lean back a little bit and say, all right, I don't have to be so pedal to the metal. So even if it's not day to day or week to week, just reminding yourself you can kind of curate that whole year where you might have times that you're super duper in it and then times where hopefully you can completely step away.
I do like your Yeti cup there, though, that you're drinking out of.
Hey, thanks. Like I say, girls gotta
Hey, check
stay
this out.
caffeinated.
Check this out. I also have a white Yeti cup that I'm drinking
Oh, we're a matchy match.
out. Where are you at today? You're in Alaska?
Yep, I'm in Alaska. I'm in the new Heather's Choice headquarters, and I'm sitting in Brad's office instead of mine because his is a lot warmer because it is still straight up winter here.
Like negative?
No, it's more we're kind of entering the ice age where it is just an ice skating rink as far as the eye can see. So we keep oscillating between freezing versus not. So yeah, we're just in ice. That's basically my reality.
For people that don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of just a high level flyby? Who's Heather? Who's Heather Kelly?
Sure. Hello, my name is Heather, and I live in Anchorage, Alaska. I run a business called Heather's Choice, which is a line of dehydrated meals and snacks for adventuring. We manufacture all of our products here in Anchorage at our dedicated gluten-free kitchen, and our goal is to put good, healthy food in people's packs. I was born and raised in Alaska, so I'm very Alaska proud. I have a background in sports nutrition and eating psychology. I was also a highly competitive athlete in college, and athletics is still a huge part of who I am and what I do. I have a dog named Django, and my favorite thing to do is go rafting. How was that for my
the only thing you
30-second
missed
pitch?
was the walks on the beaches at sunset, but that's okay. We can get to that later. So where did you grow up in Alaska?
I grew up in a little place called Bird Creek, which is just south of Anchorage.
South of Anchorage? I thought you would be in the water if you went south of Anchorage. Is my geography bad?
Nope. You would head south along the Turnagain Arm. So you basically are driving the highway where the mountains meet the ocean. So
Yeah.
you're not too far off.
Yeah. What does a little girl do in Bird Creek growing up?
Try to not get eaten by bears. Like my mom would literally, she would tie a little red balloon on me. So if I was like outside in the backyard, which was 2.5 acres that bumped up against Chugach State Park, I always had a German Shepherd on my side and probably like a little red balloon or a set of bear bells on me.
No way.
Yep. True story.
Did you ever actually have any scary experiences?
No, not as a kid. I don't think I had any scary experiences with bears because, again, we always had dogs. But yeah, we would just kick it outside, do a lot of berry picking, a lot of fishing. Like I said, where the mountains meet the ocean in the Bird Creek area, you have these tidal mud flats that just go as far as the eye can see because you have all the glacial silt that comes down these rivers and then gets deposited right there where the saltwater meets. And as a kid, like the big thing was to stay off the mud flats because it acts like quicksand. And so you can imagine as a parent, if your like little hellion kids are running around on these mud flats, like little Jimmy can get stuck in the mud and then disappear. So that was like one of the kind of hilarious urban legends that our parents drilled into us was like, do not get stuck in the mud because if you do, like you will sink and we will never see you again.
That's crazy. Yeah, what a wild place to grow up. I'm assuming that's why you became outdoorsy is because you literally grew up in the last frontier.
Yeah, I would say so. It's just, that's kind of what you do. You know, I grew up skiing and snowboarding and rock climbing and I didn't really become, I would say, an outdoors woman until I was 18 and I got into rafting. That's kind of at what point I started to fall in love with hard work and being in the great outdoors for extended periods of time.
What type of rafting? Like whitewater rafting?
Mm-hmm. Yep. My first job when I was 18, that was kind of in the outdoor industry. We had a river trip where we would start in Girdwood. We would catch the train from Portage to Spencer Glacier. So we would take our clients on this train ride. We would then get them out to this big glacial fed lake. And we would get people into these 18-foot rafts and then oar them around icebergs, which was pretty cool. And then
Normal
you would
childhood,
raft.
really.
You know, that was like my 18-year-old job.
Yeah.
And then we would raft them about 5 miles back to the train. and then take him back out of there. And that was our day trip that we would run. And so I got to spend, 4 months of the year outside every single day, just hauling people and hauling rafts.
What you mentioned you were highly competitive in a sport. What was it?
I did women's rowing at Western Washington University in Bellingham. And how I got into rowing was, again, rowing rafts.
Yeah. You definitely seem like a competitive personality. Like you can kind of tell when you meet somebody that's highly competitive. And I definitely got that from you, which is probably why you are also an entrepreneur. Partly.
Yeah, partly. I would say so. I think that my perspective on entrepreneurship is not a me versus them so much as of a can I do it, kind of a wonderment of like, can I actually maybe pull this off? So I think I'm equally as competitive with myself as I am with other people.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. Like oftentimes entrepreneurs are competitive themselves so much that they kind of want to keep proving themselves and their like deepest fears wrong, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, but what if, but just what if I could? That'd be feel pretty good. And then if I get there, what if I did it even more difficult? Like it's like I was watching that documentary, which by the way, if anybody hasn't seen The Alpinist yet on Netflix, it's the best documentary I've ever seen. And it's about a gentleman, excuse me, an alpinist who like literally just shatters what everybody thought was possible in the alpine world. And I'm not in that world. I'm definitely not a rock climber or anything like that. I'm a hunter, but heights scare the heck out of me. But this kid, like, just literally just broke like I said, he broke anything that we thought was, or that world thought was possible, he broke it. And it seemed like when he did that, then he's like, but what if I did that? And then once he did that, he's like, what if I did that? And he wasn't trying to, at least I didn't get it from the documentary. I think he was not trying to get famous. He was always competing with himself. And I think it was an interesting analogy to some like hyper competitive entrepreneurs that I know that aren't out there to beat the next business. They're literally just, they have to compete with themselves and push themselves outside their comfort zone and find that positive stress, or they're like extremely bored.
Yeah. The positive stress thing, I think, is a really key point that you made.
Yeah. And that's why when I first met you and I started looking, excuse me, more into your company and the, just the adventure aspect of your story. I don't know if I'm breaking your tagline is meals for adventuring, right? Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I love that because you're taking something that's like, it's food. We all need it. We all take it in the mountains with us, but you're like tying a much bigger story to it. Like the reason we need food in the mountains, we're going out there for an adventure. And so this is just part of your toolkit, but it's a really important part of your toolkit. I love that story. And it makes a lot more sense now that I know that you were like rowing people around icebergs when you were 18.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I did a podcast recently with somebody and told them the ridiculous evolution of, 18-year-old Heather rowing rafts to Heather moving back to Alaska to start this business. And it's been such a ridiculous journey, but I'm just so like curious and excited each day to be like, okay, let's see what happens next. And I feel like it's served me pretty well to have that almost insatiable curiosity over the last however many years.
When did you start your company?
I started Heather's Choice in the summer of 2014. So it'll be 8 years this summer.
Wow. And
I know.
And it's always been based out of Alaska.
More or less. I don't know how much I've told you about this, but when I started, I was literally making food in an apartment and hand labeling and sticking stuff in these bags that I had gotten from the local coffee shop and then driving everything to the post office. Like I was doing all of it myself. And the normal trajectory for any food company is that you develop the recipes, you develop kind of a base of customers, and then you take your recipes to a co-packer so that they can manufacture everything for you. And you just focus on the sales and marketing of the product, right? Like if you're big enough, somebody else is making it, somebody else is distributing it, and you just have to sell it. So I tried that on multiple occasions, tried to outsource the manufacturing of the products. On 3 separate occasions with 3 separate co-packers, I got freaking worked. Like the quality of the product that we were getting back was abysmal. And we're wondering like, why is our repeat customer rate like in the shitter? Like what's going on here? And then we would come to find out that people were getting essentially burnt food, or we would have product going bad before expiration, or like whatever it was. Like if it was bad, it was happening. And so finally in 2017, after basically 2.5 years of attempting to go the co-packer route, we said, screw it, and ended up buying a coffee shop here in Anchorage and converting it into a full-blown production kitchen. And it doesn't like make a ton of sense for most people of like, why are you making this stuff in Alaska? Like, why are you doing every part of the business yourself? And it's like, man, I promise you, I really did try to go the traditional route with this food business, and it backfired on me enough that I decided like I needed to do it differently. And thankfully, thus far, knock on wood, like it's working out for us really well, the setup that we have now. But it was very unconventional.
What did you do before you started it?
Before I started Heather's Choice?
Yeah.
Before Heather's Choice, I had moved to Colorado in 2011 to pursue my raft guiding career. So I thought like, oh, I've been a raft guide in Alaska for 5 years. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to go somewhere warmer where I don't have to wear, a dry suit or thermals or whatever. And literally showed up in Colorado, had applied for every rafting company in the Fort Collins area, landed a job, found out very quickly I was making $6 an hour and the tips were total shit. And I was like, dude, this is not working for me. Like, this isn't what I want to do. So I ended up working with a CrossFit gym in Fort Collins that allowed me to hang my shingle as a sports nutritionist at their gym. And so from 2011 through about 2016, I had a really robust nutrition and eating psychology coaching business that I ran.
Oh, cool. So
Yeah.
you've never had a normal job?
Mm-mm. No.
Excuse me. Were you programmed that way when you were younger, or is that just something that naturally happened? Like,
No. My dad had a brewery when I was a kid. So
nice.
My dad previously had framed houses, and he would be traveling all over the place, obviously building houses across Alaska. And so when I came into the world, he was like, man, I don't want to be gone all the time, while little Heather's growing up. And so he, took a chance and decided, hey, I'm going to start a microbrewery. It was the first microbrewery in Anchorage. And his reason for doing that was so that I could go to work with him every day. And so literally I remember, we'd hop in the truck and we would go to the brewery, and I would sit there and eat pretzels on big old pallets of barley or yeast or whatever it was, and got to see my dad's whole bottling line go in, and the forklifts and the big ass coolers and the tours he would do on Thursdays. And I think that's pretty deeply imprinted in my mind of just that.
Yeah. You
hustle.
You got to learn the hustle early.
Yeah.
So you almost didn't know another way.
Mm-mm. No, I wouldn't say so. In contrast, my stepdad worked for the railroad for, I want to say he was there 36 years, same job, union gig, pension plan, all of that. And sure, like financially, he came out much further ahead than my dad. But man, I think he looks back on it and is like, I gave up some of the bulk of my life to this business for however long. And I wasn't in charge of my schedule. And I worked night shift and I worked long hours and I was away from my family for extended periods of time as a conductor for the railroad. And there was nothing about that was attractive to me at all. Like the drive and motivation to work to simply fill a retirement fund does not get me out of bed in the morning. Don't care.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have some of my best friends actually have jobs where they have no emotional attachment to the job. But they go in for 8 hours a day and they do a great job. But when they go home, they don't even think about it. And they look at my life, they're like, dude, screw that. I got to know when my paycheck's coming. I want to know what year I'm retiring. And when I get home at 5 p.m., I want to crack a beer and not think about my job again until 8:30 the next morning. And to me, that's so foreign, and probably sounds like to you too. Like, that's not for me. But I also think it's really important that it's for a lot of people. Like, we need all kinds of people, right? But I'm fascinated with people's brains like yours, where you grew up and you see this hustle, and so you figure, I like rowing. I'm gonna be a guide. Where do you go? You go to Fort Collins. I'm gonna. You have all these fantasies we all do when you're that age about like, I'm going to get rich being a rowing guy or a river guide. And, but that's kind of the part of the hustle is you kind of, you learn to get punched in the chin, and then you just keep, it's almost like you're a glutton for punishment. You keep going in different directions, but kind of hitting more walls. And pretty soon you find yourself, you start your business with Heather's Choice in 2014. What on earth like makes anybody want to start a business? If you actually write it down and think about it, is crazy. Like, the chances of success are so low. So like, here you are in your kitchen making these recipes. Like, you're like, I think I'm going to do this full time. I'm going to build a worldwide brand, and I'm going to, like all the fantasies we have as entrepreneurs. But at what point did you like have to be like, no, actually, really, this is what I'm doing, and now I'm scared shitless?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. So the summer of 2014, when I moved back to Alaska, I was very broke, and I was living in a camp trailer in my dad's front yard with a big long extension cord running out to it. Like, I was kind of almost a bottom, feeling pretty sorry for myself, but I was so grateful to be back in Alaska because it was the lifestyle that I wanted. Like, I wanted to be here and to have the freedom to go pack rafting and pick berries and go catch fish and just like be here. And I was so just excited about this idea for Heather's Choice that, any money that I had, I was going and buying ingredients and buying more tabletop dehydrators and just making this stuff and giving it to people. I remember spending a 3-day weekend house sitting, and I don't think that those dehydrators stopped humming all 3 days because I was just so pumped about this idea. And then my good buddy Jason, who I had met through rafting back in 2011, was like, gosh, your enthusiasm and your excitement for this it's palpable, right? Like, what's it going to take for you to actually turn this into a business? And at that time, I'm like, I don't know anything about food manufacturing. Like, manufacturing wasn't even part of my vocabulary, right? Like, I wasn't manufacturing anything. I was just making food. And so he sat me down one night on the couch. We had cocktails. He's like, here's an EIN number. Here's how you get a business license. Like, what else do you need? I'm like, well, I need a bigger dehydrator and I need a kitchen to operate out of, like the camp trailer thing is not going to last me through the winter. And so he's like, all right, I tell you what, you can live in one of the 4 units in my fourplex. I won't charge you anything for it. Let's go to Cabela's and buy you the biggest dehydrator that they have, which was basically the size of a wine cooler. And I triple dog dare you to make this into a business. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Adventure? Sure.
Yeah. And I think that one of the key pieces of that is I had so much trust in Jason and respected him so much as a really successful entrepreneur in the community here in Alaska that I just felt like, okay, sure. Like, I don't really have anything to lose. Like, let's try it. And that, like, probably from early July to mid-August, I was just in sort of like frantic energy mode, trying to get everything pulled together to go for launch on August 15th. And I think when I finally hit publish on the Shopify website and I placed an order, my first order was me ordering my stuff to make sure that this whole thing worked. And I was sitting in my car at like 10 o'clock at night, using the app and checking to see like, yes, an order did come in. And I was like, oh, fuck, this is real. This is happening. So I think that was probably the pivotal moment that I realized I had embarked on a new adventure and I did not know what to expect from there forward. And I still don't.
Well, there's many things I could ask you off of that story, but the fear you felt in that moment is like the fear of the unknown seems to be what keeps most people back from doing what you did. How do you cope? I mean, here we are. We're 8 years later. 8 years
Almost.
later. Almost 8 years later. And that sort of, I call it living in the gray. The gray doesn't go away. That like until you sell a company and it's like over, you've exited it and the money's in your bank account, even then you're still kind of living in the gray because maybe you're still involved. You don't know what the future of the company is, all these things. Having a business or, being an entrepreneur, it seems like you're always living in a perpetual state of, like you try to plan, but plans are as good as the paper, only as good as the paper they're written on most of the time because you have to be able to change. So how do you cope with that? Like that's crazy. I mean, you're like in a yoga position right now. You seem very like you can actually relax. But how do you cope with the stress of constantly having to live in the unknown?
I think one of the things that I reflect on often is whether or not I truly believe it's a friendly universe, right? Like, do I really think that inherently I am a bad person and people are out to get me? Or do I like really at my core believe that I'm a failure and I suck and I'll never win at anything? Or do I like live in this constant state of like, oh God, when is the other shoe going to drop? Like things are going really good right now. Something inevitably is going to go bad. And do I also feel like, do I believe it's true that I'm going to be handed things that I truly can't handle? And as I kind of look back over my life up to this point, my short life, I'm 34 years old. Like, sure, I've had some life experience, but not relatively a ton. But when I look back on the really, really, really hard times or just things that felt really challenging or intense, I can confidently say that I always made it out the other side, right? Like whatever happened in this 34 years, like I'm still here. I'm still healthy. I still have my head screwed on straight. Like I'm okay. And I also think that it's just really getting crystal clear on like, what is the worst that could happen? And I have had this conversation with mentors like you in the past, many a time. And folks who have sat me down and I've been like, okay, so if I don't raise this money or if I don't hit these sales goals, what is the worst case scenario? And I distinctly remember this conversation with one of my business mentors who sat me down and was like, okay, well, if you don't hit these revenue goals, you're going to find yourself $250,000 in the hole at the end of the year, and you're going to have to file for bankruptcy, and it's going to be a really painful process. And for me, it was like, okay, like sit up straight, get to work. Like that is the worst case scenario, is like a really big bruise to the ego and a metric shit ton of paperwork. Like that's the entirety of it. Like if that's the worst case scenario, then let's go. Let's like try, because the best case scenario is so different than that. And I feel like we as entrepreneurs are so quick to feel as if like, if we fail, we're going to die. Like that's the visceral feeling you have of failure. And that shit keeps people from trying anything. But if you actually take the time to say legitimately, what is the absolute worst case scenario here? It's that your ego is going to get bruised, and your ego will do whatever it takes to keep that from happening. And so then we freaking sit on our hands and we don't start the podcast, or we don't start the businesses, or we don't go for gold because we're trying to protect our ego from getting hurt, and which clearly makes me viscerally sick. I'm just like, that is so dumb to like let that determine whether you try or not.
Well, yeah, what you just said is so true. And I just wonder, like, is it really what we're worried about? How we would feel about ourselves if that happens, or are we more worried about like the true bruise to the ego may not be the paperwork or the bankruptcy itself. The true hit to our ego would be how we believe people think of us when we come out the other. Like, it seems like that's actually, if you state out loud what you are scared of, most of the time it's, I'm afraid I'm going to do this, fail, and everybody's going to think I'm a loser. Mm-hmm. And if other people think I'm a loser, I'm going to believe them, because we're tribal and we want people's support. And unless you're like a narcissist, like at the highest level, you usually care what people think about you. And it's really hard to separate those two things. And I can't remember if it was you that I feel like we've talked about this before, maybe, but I have horrible anxiety almost at all times. I seem like a really laid back guy, but I really have struggled with the general anxiety disorder or whatever. And one of the things that that happens when you have that is you're always worried about something. Not necessarily anything specific. You're just worried that something bad is about ready to happen. And most of the time you can't even name what it might be. In fact, if you did, it would sound stupid. Like, I'm scared that a missile is going to hit my house right now, or, whatever. But if you can, especially if you're like me and you have high anxiety, or you're starting a business, or you're doing something super, super stressful in life, it is so relieving to actually either say it out loud or write it down. Like, have someone ask you, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? Like Heather just said, and write it down and then say it out loud. And most of the time when you do that, it actually won't even feel that scary. You're like, okay, so I got to do some paperwork. Yeah, it kind of sucks, but there's life after bankruptcy, and most people live through it, and everything would be fine. So, that's not nearly as bad as I construct it in my head. I don't know why we do that to ourselves, but it seems like we just manufacture. And believe me, like, especially in business, it seems like bankruptcy is the biggest fear, or like failing to where you got to shut it down. You've got to fire people that you care about. You care about their families. You've got to, sell the rest of your product for less than what it's worth. It's embarrassing. It's draining. It's financially tough. Like, it's not that it's not real fear. It's just, it's actually manageable fear. It's like you can cope with it. But it's not as black and white as we often manufacture in our head, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And another piece that somebody had said to me along the way was, you don't have anything to lose, right? Like, I don't own a home. I don't have kids. I have a boyfriend, a dog, and like relatively, I don't have a lot physically on the line. Whereas for you, it would be like, oh yeah, great, Heather, this all sounds well and good. But like, if I go bankrupt, like, I'm actually compromising the quality of life for my kids, my wife, and all of that. So I realized that's a big difference between me and a lot of people. But one of my mentors was just like, look, you're already in it. Like, if I were you, I would go and like borrow and raise as much money as you possibly can, because like, no matter how much money you're in the hole in the end, like if you do have to file for bankruptcy, like you're still in a really big financial hole. So like, it was a really interesting sort of proposal to be like, play to win and go all in, because like you've already started the race. So whether you quit a mile in or 22 miles in, like you've already started, and you might as well just go for gold on this thing. And
yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Right.
I actually hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, in business, bankruptcy is bankruptcy. I mean, it doesn't matter if you owe $5,000 or $1 million, or, I mean, I think the process is pretty similar. Let's talk about, like, as an early entrepreneur, it seems to be another hurdle people, and everybody has the same hurdle. Like, money is a problem. Capital is an issue. Even when you're a thriving business, sometimes capital is a major issue, and sometimes even more when that happens, because you need to buy more inventory, and you can't, because there's a difference between having a thriving business and having cash. Like, sometimes those are two different things. How do you manage as an entrepreneur financial stress? Like, I mean, I'm sure you pay yourself now, but there was probably a period of time where you didn't pay yourself and you just kept putting it back into the business. Like, how does one get through that?
It's a good question. I would say that money and finances and all of that is sort of that's my Achilles heel. That's the thing that will bring me to my knees, because it feels so emotionally charged. I think because I've had times of abundance and times of real scarcity. So it's like a very cellular experience for me of like, ooh, I know what it feels like to have no money, and I know what it feels like to have a bunch of it and everything in between. And I think that I got really lucky early on, having someone walk me through sort of the natural trajectory of a business, where you start with putting your own money into it, you graduate to friends and family, then you might look for, like in our case, we did a Kickstarter campaign that was really validating. So some sort of crowdsourcing, kind of getting your customers to be your first funding opportunity, moving to angel investing, eventually to VC, and then institutional lending. So even though I didn't know what any of that stuff meant when somebody said it to me back in 2015, probably, it still has stuck with me long enough to understand that there's a bit of a life cycle for any business. And I don't know how this is different in your world, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it really was just kind of a helpful understanding of what that natural evolution is of how you go about funding a business idea as it grows. And I think that I have just been slowly but steadily working my way through all of those phases, and having to get even better and more precise with my cash flow planning, my projections, fundraising, all of that as I go along. But Heather in 2014 did not speak this language. Let's be clear about that.
I mean, let's be honest. No one does until you actually, well, unless you're getting an MBA from Harvard. But even then, I would argue sometimes the only way you learn some of this stuff is by actually doing it. And when you meet people that really understand the ins and outs of that, they're actually really impressive people, especially if you're not a numbers person. Naturally, I'm not. I think I'm more like you, where it's like I'm more of a creative, fly pretty high level. But there's actually truly a science to all of this. And I've noticed that when business owners are struggling with capital raise questions or cash flow questions or any financial questions, they spin themselves up in a tizzy because they don't understand it and it really stresses them out. But there's probably one phone call that they could make that would ease all of their anxiety, at least by someone that knows what the hell they're talking about. Because most of us don't know what the hell we're talking about when it comes to that. And we sound like complete idiots when I don't know what to do. We have to buy inventory and I don't have the cash to do it. And it's like, there's people out there that can walk you right through the process. And these problems have occurred before millions of times. And even like especially when you're first starting a business and like, $5,000 my little brother Blake and I, Heather, my little brother now. So my little brother Blake, for those who haven't listened to the episode that I recorded with him, he is a entrepreneur, but in a separate industry. He was in the tech industry. And the numbers you talk about in the tech industry don't even register in my mind. Like, so when I talk to him about my little industry I play in, I remember one time I was stressed out because I was like, I had like $2,700 credit card bill for my business. And I told him that. He's like, "Are you fucking kidding me right now?" He's like, "This is what we're going to talk about?" Like, I don't want to hear about it. Like, the world I come from, you have like $10 million in debt. So you want to talk about stress? I don't want to hear about your Visa credit card. And so my point is all of this stuff is subjective depending on who you talk to. So if you're going through money problems, which we all do, and I still do, you have to call somebody. It's almost like getting a red dot on your body, and you're like, "Oh my God, I have whatever," and you start Googling it, and like basically you can find whatever answer you want, but in reality, you should just call a doctor, and they're going to be like, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's XYZ." The financial part of business is just like getting a doctor. Like, you have to have somebody that understands it, because they will ease your stress, or at least, if they might not ease your stress, but at least be able to guide you through a really stressful situation. Because let's be honest, folks, most of us don't know what the hell we're doing with finances. It's a very specific specialty. So like Heather said, when she was in her kitchen, she didn't know what the hell she was doing. She wanted to make recipes, and she's going to blow it up for the world. And I don't know what the capital of Alaska is. What, Fairbanks? No. I'm sick. What? What is the capital of Alaska?
Juneau.
I'm such an idiot. See, folks, you got to talk to specialists. Anyways, you get the point. This is the point in business where your ego also gets bruised, because you actually have to ask and seek help when you feel like, especially in the beginning, you're on top of the world. You're about ready to be a millionaire and sell your business for trillions of dollars, and you know everything, and you have the best idea that's ever been created. No one's ever thought of it. And then you don't know what the hell you're doing, and you got to call people, and you got to involve people. You got to give away equity. You have to bring people onto a board that yells at you. You have to, that's a pretty big bruise on your ego.
Yeah. I think that's what my current sort of like mantra has been, though, is like, I'm actually really willing to be wrong. And so like, I'm willing to take messy action and do things and be reprimanded by my partner, Brad, or be reprimanded by my board, or like whatever it is. Like, I'm willing to be wrong rather than to be stagnant and to not make decisions. And it sucks to have an employee quit, or to feel like you're in trouble with your board, or to have somebody say no to investing, or to have a pissed off customer. Like, there's a lot about that that really sucks. But again, if you aren't taking action and making mistakes, then you're just standing still. And that was something my dad always said when he said this to his crew when he was framing, and whether I agree or not, it's still funny. He would tell them, if you're not making mistakes, you're not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
So like, that's kind of a fun sort of like litmus test of like, am I making mistakes, or is everything I'm doing so calculated that I'm actually wasting time because I'm not like moving at a steady enough clip to actually get anything done?
Mistakes are scary. I feel like we get better at it as we get older, because we realize that that's kind of the definition of life. Like your whole life, basically, you're either growing or declining, and so you just kind of, it still sucks though, especially big mistakes when you bring other people along. It's hard to manage, but yeah, you're right. If you can't, it's almost like, my wife and I have this conversation because she's a perfectionist, and she hates making mistakes. It like really, really, really bothers her. Whereas I am probably her polar opposite. But not to say that I don't like making mistakes. I feel like an idiot all the time. But I guess I just care a little bit less about it. Like, you got to manage risk, but you have to be willing to, like, here's my analogy, Heather. Tell me if this is correct. And I think you will be able to relate to this. I believe because I was raised a hunter, hunting specifically is 99.99999% failure. Most of my life, I'll hunt, hopefully, God willing, until I'm however old. Let's just say I have 70 years of hunting. 99% of that time, I failed at killing something, let's call it, if that's how you define success. Because of that, you wake up every day hunting, you're tired, you're hungry, you're dehydrated, you didn't sleep well, you're cold. Like, oftentimes you're questioning what the hell you're doing with your life. Like, why do I like this? It's miserable. Why don't I why didn't I get into surfing or like something that's like somewhere at least warm? But the moment you succeed and you fail, and then in 1 second, everything changes and you succeed. And then that entire trip is a success just from that 1 second. And I think because I was raised like that, you were raised like that in the outdoors, where you're like having to constantly problem solve and like hit rocks in the raft and almost flip over and, navigate rapids, and you have annoying people that you got to be with. You got to figure out how to deal with them. I think by nature of that environment, you learn that it's almost impossible to live an adventurous life without it almost all being failure. But it's like leading down a path to success. It's really kind of fucked up, but it's the truth. I think people that were raised with more structure, this is what you do. This is, and they have, my daughter's the same way. She's very much a perfectionist, and I really work on it with her. It's very good because she's going to be like a CEO. Trust me. But also, she'll start learning something like the guitar, and she'll get really, really frustrated to where she'll quit because she's not perfectly playing it like the girl on YouTube. And I just feel like if you were raised in the outdoors, which I'm trying to do with my kids as well, you have to figure it out in an environment that doesn't want you there, which is pretty similar to entrepreneurship. Do you think that's a good analogy? I've been working on that one.
Yeah, I dig it, because I think that it's important too to realize that, at least I believe this, I believe that everybody has that propensity and that desire for a sense of overcoming, right? Like, I think we're seeing that right now in this sort of max exodus of people leaving their jobs. And what I've heard pretty consistently from people is that, they're not challenged. It's not mentally engaging. They don't feel like they're really growing. And so it's causing them to say, screw it. I'm going to go do something else that does actually make me think and does actually challenge me to grow as a person. And I think that we have that benefit in the outdoors, and we have that benefit in entrepreneurship, that every single day presents a new challenge that you then have to grow to overcome. And so at the end of your workday, or at the end of your week, or the end of your year, you look back and you're like, holy shit, I'm a different person. Like, I speak a different language. Look at all the stuff that I learned. Look at all that I accomplished. Sure, there was a lot of that really sucked. And I will like tell stories of that for a long time to come. But holy shit, we did it. And here we are. And even if, hey, we did it is like another year on the books for your business, and it wasn't necessarily monumental, I'm sure that you accomplished something, or you changed something, or you got more efficient, or you overcame a personnel problem, or whatever it was. And I think that we are so fortunate to have that sort of baked into our experience all the time, that it seems like people in certain jobs, maybe safe jobs, they don't get that satisfaction at the end of their day or their week or their year.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wonder, I guess that's the lure of adventure, right? Is we always talk about the unknown as this scary, dark place full of demons. But I feel like, I mean, most people want some sort of adventure in their life. It's all subjective of what that actually means. For some people, it could be, 3 days off a year taking their kids fishing, but it's still an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a desire for the unknown, but I think sometimes we undervalue it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we desire that unknown more than, like you said, more than we even necessarily realize. And I think that you can probably relate to that in the outdoors, where if you were going back to the exact same spot, chasing the same species at the same time of year, every year with the same people, eventually you'd be like, dude, I'm bored.
Oh, I fall into that trap all the time, because what happens is you find something, you have an experience that like hits all your dopamines, like you loved it, like in travel or hunting or whatever you do, and you try to spend the rest of your life recreating that same experience, and what happens is it actually dilutes it. That's why everybody always wants to move to where they vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I do too, but it dilutes over time. I actually had this happen last year. I've hunted almost every year of my life in Oregon, and but last year I didn't draw anything else, so I literally only hunted elk in Oregon, and I'm like, I love my home state, but God, like, it just seemed like I went to places I've hunted my whole life. It was great, and I'm fortunate to be out there, and I harvested my elk and all that, but I didn't really tickle my adventure like that I need, and I'm more committed looking forward to trying new things. Like, I spent more money this year putting in for tags that I've never even put in for before, just because. And it's less about the animal as much as it is like, I just like going to places I've never been to. And the reason I like doing that is because you throw the backpack on and you have no idea what's going to happen. And I guess that's why I also like the life that I've created now in business. Is I wake up in the morning, and how much I fail or succeed is like all on me, sort of like that backpack. Like, and if I don't, I have no one else to blame it on, unfortunately. Some days I wish I did.
Yep. I had that experience a little bit this past year, where I've now rafted the Grand Canyon 6 times. So I've gotten to spend 6 months of my life in the Grand Canyon doing that. And it's my favorite trip on earth. And when I came off the river in 21, after 30 days, I was like, like, yes, the people are different every trip, which invites like a whole nother group dynamic and a new element and all of that. But I kind of realized, like, man, running these rapids in this size boat year after year actually isn't making me any better as a boater. Like, I'm not still on kind of that steep learning curve where each time I do it, I get a little bit better. Now it's more of kind of a plateau for me. So without changing the boat size or changing the water level or, you know, going and running different rivers, then my boating actually doesn't get any better by going and doing that trip over and over again. And so it was kind of sad. And I don't know, I was bummed about it when I came off the river in 21 of saying, like, man, I don't think I'm going to be back next year, partially because I knew that it was going to be a really pivotal time for Heather's Choice. But it also felt like, man, I don't really want the same experience every time. Like, maybe going with a different, like a smaller group, or again, a different size raft or a different time of year would invite some novelty into this. But I don't simply want to get into the routine of like, well, this is just what I do every winter, and not have that sense of, ooh, what's going to happen this time?
Which proves the point that there's something in our brains, evolutionarily or whatever you want to call it, spiritually, that craves the gray area.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just seems like that's the truth. The difference though is it's subjective to what that means for you, right? For me, it might be the things that I've described. For you, it might be those things. For someone else, it's something totally different. But whatever it is, I feel like we all need. And that positive stress comment I made, I totally stole that from Hillary Lampers. She mentioned that, and it really struck a chord with me. It's positive stress. We need positive stress. We have to overcome things. If we don't, we're literally and figuratively dying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like she probably talks about that from a metabolic standpoint, and that's why weightlifting is so good for you. Or I feel like even eating foods like kale that have lots and lots and lots of lectins or whatever it is, like there's actually something about that is like inherently toxic, because that plant needs its defense mechanisms, like, don't eat me. But because our body gets exposed to the stress of some of those like built-in plant toxins, you actually come out stronger on the other end of it, which is crazy shit. But I imagine Hillary could speak to that for ages.
And she totally does. But it all comes back to, obviously that's why people exercise their brain and their body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird thing that the world that we've evolved to actually seek stress, because I feel like we're pretty lucky to have to say that. I mean, literally 2 days ago, Ukraine was bombed. The people that live there right now, they're stressed out. And it's a terrible situation. I feel like most of the first world, at least, and especially in America, have been so lucky the last 30 years to be spoiled enough to actually have to introduce stress into our lives. But it's just the way our bodies and the human race has evolved. It's like we have to have positive stress. We're always going to have negative stress because we're alive, but from the entrepreneurship perspective, stress is just part of it. I mean, it's a huge part of it. It is and it comes down to how do you manage it. There's no business that's ever been created that wasn't stressful. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not if, it's when. So how do you cope with it? Something that I struggled with. I don't know. You seem more laid back than I am, though. You probably handle stress like nobody's business.
No. I've known your brother for like a month now, and he's probably seen me cry 5 times. Every time he's like, "Hey, how are you?" And I'm just like, boom, there here come the waterworks. So I don't think that I handle stress super well. I do think that I have a lot of support. I know I have a lot of support, and I also feel like my background in athletics and nutrition and health and wellness, like, really gives me a leg up, because I don't fall into the entrepreneurial trap all the time of just like not
Grinding.
eating, not sleeping, not taking care of yourself, thinking that you're getting ahead. Like, at least I have a little bit of wisdom around that of like, that doesn't work. But I think that having people like you, like Blake, like my CFO, like any of my other business mentors that are a phone call away, that I can digest and process what's going on. Like, that is, if I reflect back on my entrepreneurial journey up to this point, having people that are a phone call away and feeling infinitely supported, I feel like is kind of my secret sauce up to this point. Like, it's been infinitely helpful for me to have that.
What would you tell someone who's thinking about making changes in their life, whether that be from a business perspective or really any perspective? They're literally standing on the edge of the river. The raft is sitting there, and they really so badly want to get into it, but they're scared shitless to get into it because they don't know where the river leads or how many rapids there are, or they're going to drown. What's your, sorry for the dramatic analogy, but that's the way I think of it. What's your advice to them?
I would say flat out get support. And your analogy is so perfect. When I graduated from college in 2010, I was invited on my first Grand Canyon trip. And like, I was terrified. Sure, I had learned to row boats. I'd been oaring for 4 years up to that point, and like I was pretty good in like class 1, 2. But then all of a sudden I get invited on this Grand Canyon trip. I am the only female boat captain. I am the youngest person on the trip, and I get my guidebook, and all of a sudden I'm looking at like Lava Falls, class 9. And like, I'm terrified. Like, granted, the Grand Canyon has its own scale, so it's a class 1 to 10 instead of a class 1 to 5. But as a class 2 boater, like, I don't have class 4 whitewater skills. Like, I'm gonna die. Surely this is gonna be the end of my life. And I remember sitting at my dad's kitchen table, flipping through this guidebook, crying, just being like, what have I gotten myself into? Like, I'm going to fuck this up. I'm going to flip a raft. I'm going to hurt myself or somebody else. And like, blah, 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 blah. This whole story was created. And that guy, Jason, who encouraged me to start Heather's Choice in 2014, he was on this Grand Canyon trip with me. I met him probably a week before we launched on this river trip in December of 2010. And I just infinitely trusted him right out the gate. He's like, oh, you'll be fine. Let's go. It'll be great. Let's go to the pool and like, let's roll kayaks. And like, I'll teach you how to whitewater kayak while you're down there. And like, every line on this river, just follow me. And I shit you not, I was on that guy's like ass, like white on rice for that entire Grand Canyon trip. Like, I followed every single line he took, and I was successful. And I came out the other end of that 25 days being like, holy shit, I can row class 4 whitewater. I can row class 9 whitewater on the Grand Canyon scale. Like, how awesome does that feel? And that would not have been the case had I not literally like glued myself to somebody's hip who was better than me.
Yeah. So surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. That sort of analogy.
I would say so. That would be, it's worked for me thus far.
But you got to put your ego aside to do that.
Yeah. We ain't got time. We ain't got time to let our egos run us, you know?
Yeah. And it's hard. Like we said, everybody's got an ego. It just is how you use it. You know, you have to have a pretty good ego to even start a company in the first place, right? You have to think that your idea is so cool that people want to pay millions and millions of dollars over time to buy it. And that you are so good at running a business that you can be successful through all of the trials and tribulations. I mean, that does take an ego, and which is it, or an ego, or maybe it's just like a false sense of something, you know?
I would just lob it out there that I also think there's an opportunity to start a business not purely, but like with a deep sense of I want to be of service to people. And like nothing's going to get in my way of helping people take the next step or have healthy food or get their dream property. Like you're so motivated to have that. And again, it's not like purely altruistic, right? Because you're going to get that dopamine hit of like, you do the transaction and the people are happy and you're like, yes, I did it. Like,
yeah.
But I would say that there's a really big opportunity for us to build great businesses out of a sense of service rather than a sense of like, look at me and my great idea. Aren't I the best thing since sliced bread?
That is a really, really good point that I'm glad you made. It's hard to do that, you know, but it is such a more healthy way to approach anything, besides business. But I just feel like it's really easy to fall in a selfish trap, or you know, make it about money or whatever else. Heather, I always love talking to you. Where can people find anything and everything you do?
They can find my business, Heather's Choice, at heatherschoice.com or on Instagram at Heather's Choice. My personal Instagram account is Heather Teresa Kelly. And I feel like that's kind of my corner of the world where I try to push positivity and motivation and ridiculous stories out to people just to keep this whole entrepreneurial life journey a little more lighthearted, because it can feel so heavy at times. And if anybody ever wants to come up to Alaska, I encourage them to come up in June, July, August timeframe and really get a taste for it.
Not the Ice Age?
Not the Ice Age. February in Alaska is not something to write home about. It is shitty out there.
Well, I'm really excited for your business. I love it. I love the brand. I love the product. And I think you are an incredible person and someone that we can all learn from and be inspired by. So I appreciate you coming on the show today. And
thanks for having me.
I'm sure we're gonna do multiple versions of this. So I look forward to the next time that you come on.
Yeah, thank you again.